Well, good morning, Sister Shirley Smith. Are you sure that's your name? It's so, when I hear Smith, I think, well, maybe it's Jones or Shirley Smith is the real name.
That's right. It's all I could handle.
What I'm really interested in knowing, before you came to the DLC, I know you live in Regina now, you had spent 18 years on an Indian reservation. And I'm thinking of the transition coming from the outdoors in, what state was that?
South Dakota.
To Michigan. I mean, wasn't that a drastic change in your life?
Well, it seems like there were lots of drastic changes, but it just kind of went with the flow.
Tell me about life on the reservation.
Well, I actually, we were on two reservations in South Dakota, the west side of the river and the east side of the Missouri River, and we were right on the Missouri River. I belonged to a team, and we had 6 parishes to take care of, 3 on each side of the river. It was with the Lower Brule, because the Indians there were the Bruleys originally.
Would you mind spelling that?
B-R-U-L-E.
Okay, Brule.
Brule, yes.
Brule.
And on the other side of the river was the Crow Creek Reservation. And we had 2 parishes, one on each side, and they were the main ones. And then we had 2 parishes that were off the reservation. They were white ranchers in those parishes. And then on the west or east side of the river, our farthest mission was 50 miles. And that was kind of off in the middle of nowhere. That was Big Bend. And that was just a very small parish. And then in 30 miles from Fort Thompson was what used to be a boarding school that was run by the Benedictines. And they gave the school over to the tribe. And but the parish, the church there was the congregation was made up of white ranchers that lived around. So they came there for church. But the Indians went to Big Bend or Fort Thompson. They didn't.
Were there any other Adrian Dominicans with you?
No, nowhere near.
Nowhere near. What exactly did you do at the parishes?
Well, my role was counselor. I went as a counselor.
Oh, lovely.
But when you're there, you do whatever needs to be done. So I would work in the parishes too. And like on Good Friday, we had 6 parishes and 1 priest, so we each got a church to officiate at the services for Good Friday. And we went to wakes and funerals. With 6 parishes too, you had a lot of wakes and funerals. So
there was no change when you came here.
That's right. I was used to wakes and funerals.
And if Father...
Except that there the wakes would be almost 3 nights. And they would stay until, well, they were there all day for 3 days. And then they'd have the service, and at about 11 o'clock at night, they would serve a big meal. And then the funeral took a whole day too.
What a gift that must have been to be with Native Americans.
It was a gift. You know, I always had an interest. As a child, my heroes were the North American martyrs. You know, the Jesuits.
Oh, yes.
That went in New York area. They came, but I was really fascinated by them.
Well, even the Indian spirituality is so earth-based. You know, the sun and the moon and nature is so much a part of the Indian spirituality. Would that be something you experienced with them or not?
Not so much. You know,
Okay.
the Indians now that we were with are assimilated, especially in Lower Brule. They were quite assimilated.
For good or for ill?
Well, both, I
Both,
think. You know, you have to be assimilated in this, in the world today. And often, you know, like the rest of us, they pick up the bad things. I mean, the bad habits that are going on. And,
South Dakota was a long way from Rockford, Illinois.
Rockford, Illinois.
Where you were born to a family of how many children?
6 children.
6 children.
Yeah. They were.
And what did your father do to make a living for these 6 children?
My father worked for Roper Stoves. That's all his adult life, as far as I know. He worked there, and even I was born during the Depression, and I don't think he was ever laid off during the Depression, which was fortunate. And we were okay, you know.
Am I right in presuming you had Adrian Dominicans in Rockford?
We had Muldoon High School. In grade school, I went to the Sisters of Loretta. They were my teachers in grade school. In high school, I went to the Muldoon, where we had the Adrian Dominicans.
What was some of the rituals you had at home that were a sign of the faith of the family?
We didn't have any rituals at home. My dad was Catholic. My mother was Lutheran. But she did not go to the Lutheran church. She stayed home and cooked and cleaned and, ran the house for us. But my dad, did his duty of raising us, seeing that we were raised Catholic. We lived 7 blocks from the parish that we attended, St. Mary's Parish. And we didn't have a car, so we always walked back and forth. School was there, and also the church. The school was run by the Sisters of Loretta, and the parish was run by the Augustinian priest.
So you went to Muldoon then as a high school student?
That's right.
And that's, you decided while you were in high school that, yes, I want to enter the Adrian Dominicans?
I did not.
You did not?
No, I did not. I did not. In fact, I was not interested in entering any place. I was not that attracted to the life of, I didn't know anything about the life of sisters, and I wasn't really interested in finding out.
But I thought you loved going to church and
I did,
praying.
But that had nothing to do with the sisters.
Oh, at that time.
Yeah, right. I think as said when I was in first grade, somebody must have said, that Jesus was present in the Blessed Sacrament in the tabernacle. So I decided I should go over and check it out. And I went over to the church. And
did you open the tabernacle?
No, I didn't. No, I didn't. But I think I believed what I was taught, and I sensed that he really was present there. So I always felt this attraction to the Blessed Sacrament. And I really was taken up, and this was kind of all on my own, because we didn't do any religious
things at home
at all. I think we said the prayer before meals on Thanksgiving, and that was about it. But
there was something going on in you.
Yes.
Something mystical was going on in you.
Well, I was very attracted to all that I learned, and as a child, I loved to read books about saints. St. Therese of the Child Jesus was one of my favorites, and
the little flower.
There was a statue of her in the church, and I would often pray at her statue. And I was often on my own. I mean, I would go, as a child, my brother was only 14 months older than I was, so the two of us kind of grew up together. The sisters in my family, we were all 5 years apart, and my brother was 14 months older than I was, and then the other brother was 7 years younger than I was. But when we were little, we would walk to church with my dad, and he would take big steps. And I can remember hanging onto his hand and trying to keep up with his big footsteps. And then when we got older, you know, we went on our own. We had a children's mass at 8:30, so I'd go to that and I'd sing in the choir. And
Well, when did you say to yourself, I think now I really want to be a religious sister?
Well, it didn't really work that way with me. I thought nothing of it. I was attracted to the Lord, you
Yes.
know, and but not. I didn't think of being a religious sister. There wasn't anything about that, and I certainly didn't want to teach school, and so. In Muldoon, we had a retreat, a 3-day retreat every January between the semesters. And when I was a sophomore, in the middle of the retreat, this just came to me. I'm going to be a Discalced Carmelite and pray for priest. That was the first time that I ever thought, and that was something that came to me. I didn't say all of a sudden I want to be a sister, but you know, it was more like that's what
You heard the Lord speaking.
Well, yes, in his way. But I was not impulsive, and I wasn't one to run off at 16 or 15 or 16 to the convent. I said, well, I'm going to finish. I'm going to graduate from school, and in the meantime, I will read and pray and discern about this. And I certainly never told anyone that I was even thinking of that. I remember one of my girlfriends said to me once, before this happened, she said, you know, I'm thinking of being a sister. And I said, well, I'm glad I don't have a vocation. But once I heard this stayed with me. And I didn't do anything about it, but you know, I was a regular teenager. I did all the things. I love movies. We'd go to the movies every week. And but the day after, I did look at other things, you know, too. I thought, well, if I wasn't a Discalced Carmelite, and I think that came through my relationship with a little flower, with St. Therese of Lisieux. And then later I also learned more about Teresa of Avila, who became my patron. And but I thought, well, if I wanted to join an active order, I was interested more in nursing or medical
missionaries
than going to joining a teaching order. And,
well, that would please your parents to go to
my parents didn't know
Asia
what was going on with me. They never knew what was going on. And I never did anything about it until after I graduated from high school. On Memorial Day, we had Mass in the cemetery. And the priest who was saying the Mass was the one who taught us as seniors at Muldoon. And I thought, well, I need to talk with somebody. I need a spiritual director, so I made an appointment to see him. And my mother asked me where I was going that night, and I said, well, I'm going over to see Father Vanderpool and talk about becoming a medical missionary and going to India. She says, no, you're not. I said, yes, I am. Anyway,
surely.
I talked with him about it, and it was interesting because he had his whole history too. He was an Episcopalian priest who transferred, who became a Catholic.
Wow.
And when he became a Catholic, he was disowned because his father was a Methodist minister, so his parents disowned him, and all his colleagues were Episcopalian priests, and they had nothing to do with him. So he had no place to go. So he went to the Sisters of Mercy in Aurora, Illinois, at the hospital, St. Joseph's Mercy Hospital. Took him in, and he stayed there.
Oh, beautiful.
And,
what advice did he have for you?
Well, when I told him I wanted to be a Discalced Carmelite, he said, you know, I was thinking of going to the Discalced Carmelites also. But he called me one day and he said, I'm going to Aurora and I'd like to take you there to meet the sisters if you'd like to go. And I said, oh, sure, I would go and meet them. And so I went to Aurora. Actually, it was a couple of days. I don't know if it was a whole weekend, but probably we went on Saturday and came back on Sunday. And he also took me to the Mother House in Des Plaines. And one of the sisters who was, she must have been the apostolate mistress, but she said, well, you know, you could come in September. And I said, I don't know if this is where I belong. You know, I'm not ready to come in September. I was great for discerning. I had to, this was not my will, it was God's will, so I had to be sure I got it right. And so one of them said, well, you know, while you're thinking about it, and so you can get better acquainted with us, why don't you come and work in the hospital for a while and get to know us? And that might help you decide. So that sounded good to me. So I moved to Aurora and lived in a house that was attached to the hospital. And I worked in Central Supplies. And that in those days, they did not get instruments purified. We had to put them in the, what do you call
Purifier.
it? Yeah. And so we did that, and I, you know, set up instruments and things that they needed.
How long were you there with the Mercies?
Well, I loved the job. In the meantime, I was doing a lot of discerning. In the meantime, I had written to a Discalced Carmelite convent and received an application. After 9, I loved the job, so I didn't know where to go or anything, so I just stayed there. And finally, one of the sisters said to me, well, have you decided whether you want to join us or not? And I said, no, this isn't where I belong. And she said, well, you might as well, you know, not stay here.
Yeah, right.
And so, so I planned on going home. That
So
was
did Father
March.
Vanderpool enter your life again?
He was gone.
Okay.
He had been changed from that parish to another parish. And the one who was taking his place was from Aurora, and he was in the hospital for a procedure. So I went up to and introduced myself to him and welcomed him to Rockford, because he was in, so he went back, but when I went back there, I didn't go to him for spiritual direction or anything. I was,
There's one more step now to get to the Adrian Dominicans. There's a little link there.
There's a big step. But he is a link, you know. I know you want me to move on.
No.
Let me see. Okay. As I said, all right, what I was thinking of doing was going back and filling out the application to the Discalced Carmelites. And, but again, I was saying my stations, and God said no. You know, just no with an understanding of what it meant. And that was not the Discalced Carmelites. So then I didn't know what to do. I didn't fill out my application. I just went home, and I think my mother said, well, you might as well get a job. So I did get a job, and I worked in an office. It was just a big office where no computers in those days, so we just copied numbers or something. It was someplace to work. And meantime, I was still praying, discerning. I don't know if I even knew what the word
meant,
but I knew what it was. I mean, I knew that's what I was doing. And so one day I was coming out of church, and this new priest was standing there, and he says, well, how are you? And I said, I'm fine, but I know I'm supposed to be a sister, and I don't know where to go. And he said, well, who did you have in school? And I said, the Adrian Dominicans. And he says, well, why don't you go there? And I said, maybe that's where I am supposed to go.
You've avoided it now.
God is so patient. He really is so patient with us. And So I said, maybe that's where I'm supposed to go. And from then on, everything fell into place. You know, I went up to Muldoon. I asked for one of the sisters that, well, she got after me once for not having my typing assignment done, and she didn't even teach typing. And I thought, she got after me, and I thought, well, she cares enough to get after me.
Which sister was
Sister
it?
Eugenia Clare.
Oh, right.
And so I asked for her, and she was, I think she was surprised, first of all, that I was wanted to become an Adrian Dominican, because as I said before, I never, but none of the, I mean, it was just something that you can't understand. I just trusted in God. You know, if He wanted me to be this, I said, you know, you've got to take care of it. I don't know what I'm going to do. Am I going to teach? I remember the priest said, well, when you first join a religious congregation, you know, for the first year and a half, it's almost like the cloister, because, you know, you're in formation. And so anyway, I didn't think of this at the time, but Sister Eugenia Clare was a home economics teacher. So
Lucky you.
She made all my clothes. See, that's how things fell into place without me even doing any of this.
And your family was all right with this decision?
I never asked them, and they never told me. You know,
but it wasn't
I
India.
They never interfered. Well, I suspect we didn't talk a lot. You know, people didn't talk so much about things like that, like they do now. They talk about everything, but then they didn't. And my mother, not being Catholic, you know, she always was supportive, and she always let, you know, us take part in everything. The only thing, sometimes if I didn't behave or something, she says, that's what they teach you in the Catholic school. So anyway, in this office where I worked, there was a woman who had gone to grade school with me, and I think she did go to Muldoon. She entered the Adrian Dominicans, and when she heard that I wanted to be an Adrian Dominican, she put her head down on her desk in the office, which had loads of people, and sobbed. She says, you know, I never would have left if my mother hadn't kept after me to leave. Oh. And she said to me, I'll go with you when you enter. Now, my parents did not have a car, so they wouldn't go. I had no idea how to even get there. So we were going to go on the Greyhound bus, and she accompanied me there. And I thought,
well, that's touching.
It's very touching, and it just shows how caring and loving God is. He takes care of us.
Well, she probably smoothed the path, so to speak, by telling you stories of what was...
No, she didn't do anything.
She didn't do that?
No. No. In fact, all the way there, I was praying that if this was not where God wanted me,
may there be a train wreck.
Let the bus break down, let anything happen, but don't let me get through the front door. If I get through the front door, I'll know it's where you want me to be, and I will stay there. Well, much to my dismay, I got through the front door. And, you know, I never once wanted to leave or thought of leaving. And
to this day.
You're right, never. This was where I belonged. And, well, the way things work, it was just kind of amusing sometimes. I think God has a great sense of humor. Did
you even unpack your bag as a postulant? Because I know you went right out to teach.
Well, that was the thing, see. I was going to have this year and a half of formation and prayer. I'm there 2 months, and then, of course, I never wanted to teach. I was there too much, and I was tapped on the shoulder, and Sister Rita Marie said, Sister, you're going to go out on mission. And she got one of the youngest postulant in my crowd to help me pack. Well, I was in a daze. So she did all the packing, and then she gave me a Hershey bar to help me feel better.
That was an act of kindness.
Yeah. And then the person to pick me up was there waiting. So I went down. I never got ready for anything so fast in my life. And I was in the back seat of the station wagon, and Sister Rita Marie sticks her head in the window and she says, "Did Mother tell you where you were going?" I said, "No, Sister." And she says, well, you're going to Lansing. Now, there was a whole story about Lansing, too. One of the postulants in my crowd was from Lansing, and she kept talking about how homesick she was, you know, and how wonderful Lansing was. And I heard so much about Lansing, I said, I hope I never go there. I'm so sick of hearing about it. So that's where I went. That's what I mean by God was always doing that. You know, if I said I didn't want something, I got it. But I also got things that I did want, you know.
Well, you got a beautiful name by going to.
You're right. With a name like Shirley, I never had a patron saint, so I couldn't wait to change my name to Teresa. And of course, somebody came just long enough to get the name Teresa, and so my superior suggested Mary Avila.
Sister Jean Patricia.
Yes.
Yes.
She
Avila.
suggested Mary Avila, and I'd still have Teresa for my patron.
Did you still have the name Sister Avila, and were you in the habit when you were stationed in the Bahamas?
Yes.
Was that around the time of Vatican II, or before?
It was before Vatican II. Yes, it was before.
Well, I know you always wanted to be on an island.
That was one of the things
So that
God gave me.
yes.
And that was a surprise too.
Yes.
How I ever got that opportunity.
How
I
did
mean,
the-
there's a whole story with that too.
Yeah. How did the Scarborough Fathers influence your life?
Well, very much so. They were very good, special people. They were foreign missionaries, for one thing. They were exiled from China. The pastor that I had there had been in solitary confinement for a year and tortured, and got out of China, exiled. You know, it was. Of course, they never talked about it, but.
Were they what you would call an updated community? I mean, were they ahead of?
Well, they were
where the
very
church
open
was?
and you know, and they tried to be helpful. My first pastor there was a bishop. He had been a bishop in China, and he was a very humble man, and they were very helpful, very helpful. Well, there's you know, in telling us, helping us to be open and think for ourselves. You know, before that, it was almost like the Holy Spirit wasn't necessary because we just had to be obedient, you know, and follow the.
Well, that was a gift for your life, wasn't it?
It was a change, you know, a real change. It was like growing up.
So you were able to flow right into the Vatican II changes.
Well, yes, yeah.
Beautiful.
Yes, and especially the spiritual values, you know, the things, it wasn't all the, you know, the material changes, but
You have had a journey, a spiritual journey, and I suspect that's why your life on earth for this time, I mean, I don't know if you believe in other lives, has been one of a spiritual.
I certainly do. I've been looking forward to it.
But this certainly has been for you a spiritual journey, and I know it continues. And thank you for all that you do for others. I observe that here at the Dominican Lives Center. Do you have any words of wisdom to pass on to those who know nothing about the Adrian Dominicans?
I'd have to think about that. Okay. You know, I don't think we have enough time.
So for part 2, we'll share those words of wisdom. All right?
Well, trust God. That's all I can say is trust God.
Well, that's what
know.
you are an example of.
It was that trust that brought me here,
Yes.
really. And he can be trusted.
Yes. God bless you.
Thank you. Thank you.